In the stillness of the night, the steady hum of the 24-hour laundromat's fluorescent lights was the lone beacon of life in the quiet town of Bridgeton. But beneath this ordinary scene, a mystery was quietly unraveling. Under the cover of darkness, Sheriff Tom Hollis, a man burdened by his own tragic past, couldn't ignore the unsettling sight of a young black girl, alone, frequenting the laundromat night after night. As he delved deeper into this puzzling scenario, he had no way of knowing that his investigation would lead to a discovery so heart-wrenching it would alter both their lives forever. What secret was this child concealing? How could her struggles ignite the spark that might heal a broken man's heart? Before we embark on this emotional journey, let us know in the comments where you're watching or listening from today. And if you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The small town of Bridgeton rested quietly under a blanket of stars, its streets empty except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze or the shadow of a stray cat. Most residents slept soundly behind darkened windows and drawn curtains. For Sheriff Tom Hollis, however, the night was just beginning. Tom sat in his patrol car at the edge of Main Street, his weathered hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee. At 53, he wore his age like a favorite old jacket, comfortable yet showing signs of wear. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, and his tired blue eyes remained alert, scanning the quiet town. For 5 years, Tom had volunteered for the night shift, a role his colleagues gladly passed to him. They had families to return to, lives that flourished during the day. For Tom, though, the night offered refuge, a sanctuary from the painful memories that plagued him during daylight hours. He took a sip of coffee, wincing at the bitterness, and set the cup down. His gaze drifted to the small photo tucked into the dashboard's corner. A smiling woman with kind eyes and a little girl with pigtails beamed back at him. Sarah and Emily, his wife and daughter, the family he'd lost in a tragic car accident 7 years earlier. Quickly, Tom averted his eyes, focusing on the empty street ahead. This was why the night shift suited him. Alone in the silence of his patrol car, he could pretend, if only briefly, that the gaping hole in his heart didn't exist. Bridgeton was a small dot on the map, its crime rate low, and its nights uneventful. That's how Tom preferred it. His routine was simple: patrolling streets, checking late-night businesses, and occasionally dispersing rowdy teenagers. The quiet predictability demanded little more than his presence. As the dashboard clock ticked past 11:30 p.m., Tom started his engine and began his usual route. He drove slowly along Main Street, passing shuttered storefronts and darkened windows. Only the diner at the corner and the laundromat a few blocks away showed signs of life. It was when he approached the laundromat that something caught his attention: a small figure, faintly illuminated by the dim light spilling from its windows, heading toward the entrance. Tom slowed his car and squinted, trying to make out the figure. To his surprise, it was a young girl, no older than 8 or 9. She was black, with neat braids and a faded blue jacket a size too large for her. In her arms, she carried a small, stuffed bag of clothes. Tom frowned, his instincts kicking in. What was a child doing alone at this hour in a laundromat? He watched as she slipped inside, the door swinging shut behind her. For a moment, he considered checking on her, but dismissed the thought. Perhaps her parent was inside, running late with the laundry. It wasn't his place to intervene in every unusual situation. Still, as he drove away, Tom couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that lingered. The sight of the little girl stirred buried memories he preferred to avoid. Little did Tom know, this seemingly insignificant moment marked the beginning of a mystery that would forever change his life. In the stillness of the laundromat, its fluorescent hum buzzed softly in the background. Tom kept his voice calm and gentle.
"Hello there," he said.
The girl froze momentarily before turning to face him. Her wide, dark eyes met his for a fleeting second before darting away. Without saying a word, she stood there, her small hands tightly gripping a t-shirt. Lowering himself to her level, Tom crouched down. "I'm Sheriff Hollis," he said, tapping the badge pin to his chest. "What's your name?" The girl's eyes briefly shifted to the badge, then back to him. She opened her mouth as though to respond, but no sound came out. Instead, she took a small step backward, placing the washing machine between them. Tom felt a pang in his chest at the sight of her fear. Before he could try again, the bell above the laundromat door jingled softly. Both Tom and the girl turned to see a black woman enter, balancing a large basket of laundry. "Hey, Imani," the woman called out as she made her way to a vacant machine. The girl, apparently named Imani, gave a shy wave and a quiet, timid hi in return. Relief washed over Tom. This had to be Imani's mother, he thought. Of course, there was probably a simple explanation for all of this. The woman nodded at him politely as she passed by, then began unloading her basket. Tom observed as Imani quickly distanced herself, heading toward another washing machine in the far corner. She kept her head down, her focus entirely on her task. Tom hesitated. Something still felt off, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions. Perhaps Imani was just shy around strangers. Maybe her mother trusted her enough to let her handle the laundry. It wasn't an ideal situation, but it didn't necessarily warrant alarm. Deciding not to press further for the moment, Tom glanced around the room once more. Imani was now perched on a bench, her legs swinging back and forth as she watched the washing machine spin. The woman who had greeted her appeared engrossed in a magazine she'd pulled from her purse. With a quiet sigh, Tom stepped toward the door. As the cool night air met his face, he couldn't shake the nagging sense that something important was slipping through his grasp. What more could he do? He had no solid evidence that anything was amiss, just a persistent feeling in his gut. Sliding back into his patrol car, Tom's eyes lingered on the photo perched on his dashboard. Emily's beaming smile stared back at him, and for an instant, he imagined Imani's face overlaying his daughter's. Two young girls, each vulnerable in their own way. Starting the engine, Tom's thoughts churned. He'd hoped this visit would quell his concerns, but instead, it had only deepened them. As he pulled away from the curb, he resolved to keep a closer watch on the laundromat in the nights ahead. The feeling in his gut told him that this mystery was far from over. The headlights of his patrol car cut through the darkness, and as the laundromat's glowing sign disappeared in his rearview mirror, Tom's unease grew. Sure, the woman seemed familiar with Imani, but was that enough to explain this strange situation? Gripping the steering wheel tighter, Tom wrestled with doubt. What if he'd overlooked something crucial? What if Imani was in genuine danger, and he had walked away? The idea gnawed at him, making his stomach churn with unease. Pulling over to the roadside, Tom took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He thought back to the brief interaction, the way Imani had shied away from him. Was it merely the behavior of a reserved child, or was it a sign of something darker? And the woman, was she truly someone who cared for Imani, or was he reading too much into her presence? Tom couldn't ignore the possibility that he might have missed something. He couldn't let it go. As the town sheriff, it was his responsibility to ensure every child in Bridgeton was safe. Decision made, Tom shifted the car back into drive and headed for the station. He needed answers, and the time for half measures was over. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, Tom was at his desk, surrounded by papers and an array of open tabs on his computer. Hours of searching had yielded nothing. There was no record of a girl named Imani matching her description in the local school system, nor was there an address linked to that name. It was as though she didn't exist. Frustration prickled at Tom as he rubbed his tired eyes. How could a child be so completely off the radar in a town as small as Bridgeton? Determined to uncover the truth, Tom decided to turn to the locals. If the records offered no answers, perhaps the residents of Bridgeton would. Once again, it was well past midnight, and Imani had been inside for hours. Tom watched her small figure moving around inside, methodically folding clothes and arranging them into neat piles. A lump formed in his throat as he observed the scene. There was something achingly familiar about it. It reminded him of Emily. It brought to mind the way his little girl used to help Sarah with the laundry on Saturday mornings, always so eager to be helpful, so determined to seem grown-up. The memory, which usually brought him pain, now filled him with a bittersweet warmth. In that moment, as he looked at Imani through the laundromat window, Tom made a decision. He couldn't stand by any longer. Whatever was going on with this child, he had to uncover the truth. He owed it to Imani, to his conscience, and to the memory of his family. Taking a deep breath, Tom stepped out of his car and walked toward the laundromat. He had no plan, no clear idea of what he would say or do, but he knew he had to try. He had to reach out to Imani and offer her the help she needed. As he reached for the door handle, Tom made a silent promise to both himself and Imani. He wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth. Little did he realize, that truth would shake him to his very core and change both their lives forever. The familiar chime of the laundromat door rang out as Tom stepped inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the rows of washing machines and dryers. Imani was in her usual spot, carefully folding a faded t-shirt with her small hands. Tom approached slowly, trying not to startle her. "Hello, Imani," he said softly when he was just a few feet away. Imani's head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise and a touch of fear. She stepped back slightly, clutching the t-shirt to her chest, as if it were a shield. "It's okay," Tom said, crouching to her level. "I'm not here to bother you. I just want to make sure you're all right." Imani didn't reply, but she also didn't run. Instead, she stood there, watching Tom cautiously, her body tense as though ready to bolt at any second. Tom's heart ached at the sight of her guarded demeanor. What could this child have been through to make her so wary? Before he could say more, something caught his eye. Behind Imani, her backpack lay open on a nearby bench. Inside, Tom could see more than just clothes. It held a small blanket and a worn stuffed animal. Before he could fully process what he was seeing, Imani moved swiftly. In one fluid motion, she grabbed her backpack, stuffed the folded clothes inside, and darted past him toward the door. "Imani, wait!" Tom called after her, but it was too late. The door slammed shut behind her, the chime echoing in the empty laundromat. Tom bolted outside, his eyes scanning the dimly lit street. He caught a glimpse of Imani's small figure as she disappeared around the corner of the building. Without hesitation, he took off after her. The chase wound through Bridgeton's quiet streets. Tom's heart pounded as he struggled to keep her in sight. She was surprisingly fast for her size, darting between parked cars and slipping through alleyways. As they approached the edge of town, Tom realized where they were headed. The old cemetery loomed ahead, its iron gate open like a dark maw in the night. Imani slipped through a gap in the cemetery's fence and vanished into the shadows cast by the headstones. Tom hesitated for only a moment before following. The cemetery at night was a maze of darkness and hidden obstacles. If he wasn't careful, he could lose her or injure himself in the process. But the thought of leaving Imani alone in such a place spurred him onward. Taking a deep breath, Tom squeezed through the gap and ventured into the cemetery. The darkness seemed to close in around him as he moved between the graves. The moon, obscured by shifting clouds, provided faint and unreliable illumination. "Imani!" Tom called out, his voice unnaturally loud in the stillness. "Please, I just want to help you." No response came. He moved deeper into the cemetery, stumbling over unseen roots and snagging his uniform on low branches. Each step heightened his anxiety. How could such a small child simply vanish into the night? Tom spent what felt like hours searching, checking behind every large headstone and peering into every shadowy corner. But Imani was nowhere to be found. It was as though the night had swallowed her whole. Finally, exhausted and disheartened, Tom admitted defeat. He returned to the cemetery's entrance, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if she was hurt? What if someone else found her before he could? Squeezing back through the gap in the fence, a wave of failure washed over him. He had been so close to helping her, and now she was gone. Trudging back to his patrol car, Tom's shoulders slumped under the weight of his failure. As he slid into the driver's seat, he made a silent vow. This wasn't over. He would find Imani, no matter what it took. Sitting on the bench, Tom watched over Imani as she slept. In that quiet moment, he made a solemn promise to himself. He would do everything in his power to help this child. He vowed she would never have to spend another lonely night in a laundromat again. Tom was determined to give her the safety and security every child deserved. As the night stretched on, Tom stayed at his post, his heart weighed down by the gravity of the situation. Yet, within that heaviness, he found a renewed sense of purpose. He didn't know how, but he would make things right for Imani. It was the least he could do, not just for her, but for the memory of his own family. What Tom didn't realize at the time was that this night marked the beginning of a journey that would transform both their lives forever. When the first rays of sunlight began to creep through the laundromat's windows, Imani stirred. Tom, who had dozed off on the floor, woke with a start. He watched her eyes flutter open, confusion clouding her face as she looked around. When her gaze landed on him, fear lit up her features. She sat up abruptly, clutching her backpack tightly to her chest. "It's okay, Imani," Tom said gently, his voice raspy from the long night. "You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." Imani didn't reply, but she didn't try to flee either. She simply sat there, watching him warily, her small frame tense and ready to run if needed. Taking a deep breath, Tom knew his next words could change everything. "Imani," he began softly, "I know you're scared, and I understand. But I want you to know you don't need to be afraid of me. I'm here to help you." Her grip on the backpack loosened slightly, but she still didn't speak. "Can you tell me why you've been sleeping here?" Tom asked, keeping his tone calm and low. "Where are your parents?" At the mention of her parents, Imani's lower lip quivered. For a brief moment, Tom thought she might cry. Instead, in a voice so quiet he had a strain to hear, she whispered, "Gone. She got really sick and didn't wake up." Tom's heart shattered anew. "Oh, Imani," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. What about your dad or any other families?" Shaking her head, Imani answered, "It was just me and Mom. We came here for a better life," but her voice faded and her eyes filled with tears. Tom fought to keep his own tears at bay as he pieced together her story, a tale of unimaginable loss and hardship. "How long have you been on your own?" he asked gently. "I don't know," she shrugged. "A long time." Tom nodded, his mind racing. How had this child managed to survive so long on her own? How had everyone, including himself, failed to notice? "Imani," he said, leaning in slightly, "what you've been through is more than any child should ever have to endure. But you're not alone anymore. I'm here, and I want to help you. Will you let me?" For the first time, Imani really looked at him, her dark eyes scanning his face, searching for sincerity. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why do you want to help me?" Her question caught Tom off guard, but as he gazed into her eyes, he knew he had to answer honestly. "Because," he said quietly, "a long time ago, I had a little girl too. Her name was Emily. If she were in trouble, I'd want someone to help her, just like I want to help you." Something shifted in Imani's expression. The fear in her eyes gave way to the faintest glimmer of hope. "What's going to happen to me?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Tom reached out, moving slowly to give her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he gently rested his hand on her shoulder. "First," he said, "we're going to get you some breakfast. Then we'll go to the police station and figure out how to make sure you're safe and cared for." "How does that sound?" Imani hesitated before giving a small nod. "Okay," she whispered. Relief washed over Tom. It was a small step, but an important one. "Okay," he echoed, offering her a reassuring smile. "Let's get going." Adjusting to the new situation was challenging for both Tom and Imani, but gradually, Tom began to see signs that Imani was starting to trust him. She seemed to be believing that this new life could actually be real. It was during one of the mandated home visits that Tom first met Sarah Thompson, Imani's assigned social worker. Sarah was a kind-faced woman who radiated calm. As they all sat in the living room, now also Imani's home, Tom noticed the weariness in the young girl's eyes as Sarah gently attempted to engage her in conversation. "Imani," Sarah said softly, "can you tell me a little about how things have been for you recently?" Imani glanced at Tom for reassurance. He responded with an encouraging nod, and after a moment's hesitation, she took a deep breath. "It's different now," Imani said in a quiet voice, her fingers playing nervously with the hem of her shirt. "Good different, but sometimes it's hard to talk about before." Tom felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. He wanted to pull her into a comforting hug and shield her from the pain of her past, but he understood the importance of letting her express herself. She needed to confront her feelings to truly heal. "You're doing amazing, Imani," Tom said in a gentle tone. "I'm right here with you." Sarah smiled kindly at Imani. "Can you tell me how things have changed since you started living with Sheriff Tom?" she asked. A small glimmer of light brightened Imani's face. "I'm not scared all the time anymore," she replied, her voice steady but soft. "And I have a real bed now. Sheriff Tom even got me a blanket with butterflies on it." Tom swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat at how much joy such a small gesture had brought her. "That sounds wonderful," Sarah said warmly. "What else do you like about staying with Sheriff Tom?" Imani paused to think, then answered with a tiny smile. "He makes me pancakes on Saturdays. And he reads me stories before bed, even when he's tired from work." Tom was caught off guard by how much these seemingly small acts had meant to her. He silently vowed to ensure their Saturday pancake mornings would remain a constant in their lives. "It sounds like you and Sheriff Tom have developed a nice routine," Sarah observed. "How does that make you feel, Imani?" Imani's brow furrowed as she considered the question. "Safe," she said at last. "And happy. I didn't think I could be happy again after." Her voice trailed off, and her eyes grew distant. Tom reached out and gently patted her hand. "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to talk about anything you're not ready for." Sarah nodded in agreement. "That's right, Imani. We can focus on the present and the future." She smiled warmly. "Speaking of the future, what excites you most about possibly living with Sheriff Tom permanently?" Imani's face lit up with excitement. "We're going to paint my room," she exclaimed. "Sheriff Tom said I can choose any color I want. I think I'll pick yellow like sunshine." As Imani continued chatting with Sarah about her dreams for the future, Tom was overwhelmed with gratitude. Watching Imani slowly emerge from her shell and hearing her speak with hope about what lay ahead was more than he had dared to dream of when he first found her at the laundromat. "Imani," Sarah said as their session came to a close, "you've been incredibly brave. But you don't have to face things alone anymore. Sheriff Tom wants to give you a permanent home and family." Imani turned her gaze to Tom, her eyes brimming with hope. "Really?" she asked in a small, yearning voice. "You want me to stay forever?" Tom knelt in front of her, his eyes filling with tears. Taking her hands in his, he said firmly, "Yes, Imani. I want you to be part of my family. I know I can never replace your mom, and I wouldn't try to, but I promise to love you, protect you, and give you the home and life you deserve." For a moment, Imani studied him intently, as though searching for any hint of insincerity. Then, with a small nod, she whispered, "Okay, I'd like that." Tom felt his heart swell with joy. He glanced at Sarah, who was watching the scene with a warm smile. "So, what happens next?" he asked, his voice steady with determination. "What do we need to do to make this official?" Sarah's smile widened. "Well, Sheriff," she said, "there's still paperwork to complete, and we'll need to schedule a few more home visits. But based on what I've seen today, I think we're on the right track. Imani needs stability, love, and understanding, all of which you seem more than capable of providing." As they discussed the next steps, Tom felt a renewed sense of purpose. Looking at Imani, this brave little girl who had endured so much, he silently vowed to do everything in his power to give her the life she deserved. The following months were a mixture of challenges and victories. Tom poured his energy into the process of becoming Imani's legal guardian. There were piles of forms to fill out, interviews to attend, and preparations for home visits. Yet, through it all, Tom's resolve never faltered. Imani, too, began to adjust. Slowly but surely, her quiet demeanor gave way to glimpses of the curious, intelligent child she truly was. Difficult moments still arose, nightmares that left her trembling in the night, or sudden fears that caused her to withdraw, But with each passing day, she grew a little more trusting, a little more certain that this new life was real and lasting. One sunny afternoon, as they sat together on the porch of what had now truly become their home, Imani looked up at Tom with serious eyes. "Sheriff Tom," she said softly. She still used the title occasionally, a habit from their earliest days. "Are you sure you want to keep me forever?" Tom felt a pang in his chest at the vulnerability in her voice. Kneeling down, he met her gaze directly. "Imani," he said firmly, "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. You're my family now, and that's forever, no matter what." Tears filled Imani's eyes, but this time, they were tears of joy. She threw her arms around Tom's neck, hugging him tightly. "I love you, Dad," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. The word Dad was still new, but it carried a warmth that melted Tom's heart. Tom held her close, his own tears welling up. "I love you too, sweetheart. So much." The day of the adoption hearing finally arrived. Standing in the courthouse, Tom held Imani's hand tightly as the judge reviewed their case. His breath caught in his throat. This was it, the moment that would officially make them a family. After a long pause, the judge smiled. Having reviewed all evidence and testimonies, she said warmly, "I am pleased to approve this adoption. Congratulations, Sheriff Hollis and Imani. You are now, in the eyes of the law, father and daughter." The room erupted in applause as Tom swept Imani into a huge hug. Both were laughing and crying simultaneously, overwhelmed by the moment. It was official, they were a family. As they stepped out into the bright sunlight, Tom looked down at Imani, who was beaming with happiness. "So, Miss Imani Hollis," he said, his heart brimming with pride, "how should we celebrate?" Imani thought for a moment before her face lit up. "Can we go to the laundromat?" she asked. Tom raised an eyebrow, surprised. "The laundromat? Are you sure?" She nodded eagerly. "It's where you found me," she said softly. "Where our family started. I want to remember it, but as a happy place this time." Emotion choked Tom's voice as he nodded. Without another word, they set off hand in hand, ready to create new memories in the place where their journey began. The laundromat looked different in the light of day. The fluorescent glow seemed gentler, softened by the sunshine streaming through the windows, and the hum of the machines felt cheerful rather than lonely. Imani led Tom to the very bench where he had first found her. They sat together, silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. "You know," Tom said quietly, "I used to think of this place as a reminder of hard times. But now, I think it's a symbol of hope. It's where our story began." Imani leaned against him. "It was real scary before," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now it's special. Because it's where I met you." Wrapping an arm around her shoulders, Tom held her close. In that moment, he marveled at how far they had come, from a frightened, lonely little girl and a grieving man to a family filled with love and hope for the future.